Whoever is chosen as the permanent president to succeed Johari to finish the term until 2029, that will be met with great interest and intrigue, especially with those names that are being thrown up so far. Obviously, where this is concerned, I hope that it's Khairy Jamaluddin who gets it, and with Safee Sali possibly being the next deputy president, so that he can learn the ropes on what it means to really run a football association at the executive level, so that when the time really is right for Safee to step up, he'll be more than ready to take on the job. Datuk Johari Ayub's sudden resignation of his Football Association of Malaysia presidency earlier this week has sent shockwaves not just within the headquarters but also across all spectrums of Malaysia football at large. It was only 6 months since the 59-year-old Sabahan was first elected unopposed in the FM Congress, which was held to determine the current composition of the FM count of the present FM Council for the term 2025 to 2029. And with only 6 months at the helm, Johari has now left Kelana Jaya with an unwanted record for the shortest presidency for a local in Malaysian football history since the nation's founding Prime Minister Tunku Abdul Rahman became the first FAM president way back in 1958. And as much as Johari had made history as the first East Malaysian to assume the top of the FAM, and also thus becoming the second successive non-royalty nor politician to be in charge of what is possibly the second hottest seat in Malaysian football after the national men's team head coach. It appears that the odds were quite against him on succeeding and completing the 4-year term, which was supposed to last until 2029. With Deputy President Datuk Yusof Mahadi currently now in charge of caretaker capacity as FAM President until a fresh election is called to formally appoint or elect a new successor in the next FM Congress next year, Tanyaja dissects how and why the now former FM President was somehow doomed to fail from the get-go. Prior to Datuk Johari being elected unopposed as FM President back on 15th of February this year, he had an extensive, significant, but crucially rather low-profile football administration career. He actually began his football administration journey with his home football state Sabah FA when he was the team manager and treasurer of the team that was then competing in Premier 1 or the top, which was then the former name of what is now the Malaysia Super League in 2003 and to 2004. And after a period away from the game, he returned to Sabah FA as the vice president between 2014 to 2017, and subsequently rose to become the FM vice president for 2 successive 4-year terms between 2017 to 2015 to 2025, prior to his promotion as an elected president. And during his time in charge of as being FM vice president, Johari was also crucially, among other roles that he handled, FAN National Sports Council Project Squad team manager between 2021 and 2022, and the National Boys Under-19 team manager in 2022, as well as being in charge of the local organizing committee for the men's football Under-23 football tournament in the 2017 Kuala Lumpur Southeast Asian Games. So, in those significant roles he has held, it was mainly domestically based, and it was quite clear that from the major portfolios that he has held, he was rarely involved in major decision making at the time, in the era where now Tan Sri Hamidin Amin has an overarching presence when he was in charge of the Football Association of Malaysia. And because of that overarching presence of Tan Sri Hamidin, it is pretty clear that the rest of the executive committee under his charge would be rather low profile, while Hamidin was very visible not just as the head of the Football Association of Malaysia, but also he was a long-serving national team manager in his various capacities in the FAM Council in various departments, but also was active in not just the ASEAN Football Federation, but crucially in the Asian Football Confederation, where he's now currently one of the vice presidents of the AFC, and concurrently one of the executive members in the FIFA Council. So with a man who has such a high profile presence, whose shoes that Johari had to fill, and Johari, though he has had extensive work prior to becoming FM president, Johari had not had any major assignment that made him very visible, not just in front of the Malaysian football public, but also in the international football eyes as well. And I'm just only talking within Southeast Asia and perhaps Asia. It is perhaps unfortunately that rather low profile visibility of Johari's roles and the lack of media attention. I think probably he wanted it this way, but I think I'll elaborate towards the end why it is not a good idea to have such low profile, although critically important roles within the Football Association of Malaysia if one is to become the FM president. So when you look at the profiles that he has undertaken, they were actually quite, you can say, behind the scenes roles, and that was probably his area of expertise, where he was supposed to be able to use those experiences that he has gained from all these events, which were not as high profile as what Hamidin has undertaken during his time in charge of FAM and previously at the Football Association of Selangor. So Johari had big shoes to fill, and unfortunately, and really very unfortunately, the odds were against him from the get-go. And this was only realized after looking back at his FM presidency and also the football administration career that he has had in charge of Malaysian football. And why are those odds against him from the get-go? I think it's pretty obvious to say that when a very high profile personality departs from that hot seat, in this case the FAM presidency, whoever succeeds him has huge shoes to fill. And with those really huge shoes, Johari was really up against it quite from the start, because Hamidin had been very visible in Malaysian football. He was also very visible in Southeast Asia and Asian football, and with his election to the FIFA Council in recent years, he's also now quite visible in the world football circles. Not known worldwide, but at least within the inner sanctorium of the headquarters in Switzerland. So, and Hamidin was quite an outspoken character, a very visible, very high profile. He has had that level of command and, you can say to an extent, charisma, and his ability to get people around him. That these were qualities that Johari wasn't seen to have had. And Johari and Hamidin, you can say that they are very different personalities, and as such, the council members, the affiliates who were previously used to how Hamidin used to do things when he was in charge in Kelana Jaya, they would have expected Johari to be more of a continuity candidate. It just happened that during those 6 months, when Johari was needed, he did show up, but at times found himself unfortunately quite flat-footed as the man who really mattered in Malaysian football, particularly in one or two flashpoints during his short-lived presidency. And how tough was it to fill Hamidin's shoes? I think this is where we look a little bit further on here, because unlike Hamidin, as I mentioned earlier, Johari was not known within the Southeast Asian or Asian football circles. So Johari was actually rather starting from zero, almost zero, when it comes to meeting the big characters, cultivating relationships, not just within the affiliates who he's already decently known at a decent level, but then meeting your contemporaries from Southeast Asia and Asia, that is a different level. And Johari was probably found wanting in the area, and because he was not Hamidin, the Southeast Asian and Asian officials do not see him in the same light as how they saw his predecessor, and that hindered his role as Malaysia's top football diplomat, as the head of the Football Association. More critically, and I think this is something that very few are willing to talk about it, is he, as much as Johari is Malay, he's Muslim, but the local geopolitics somehow play a part in this as well. By being the first East Malaysian to be elected into office, as much as Johari made history as the first East Malaysian and Sabahan to be in charge of the Football Association, he had quite a few things going against him, and part of it was down to both Sabah and Sarawak for quite a long time and still currently being minor players in the wider domestic football scene, especially in the powers of influence, where traditionally Selangor, where Datuk Hamidin hails from, and Pahang, where previously the Pahang royal family was in charge of the presidency for quite some time between the 90s to the mid-2010s. Both the late Sultan Ahmad Shah and his son, the current Sultan of Pahang, Sultan Abdullah, and more recently Johor. These three are the centers of powers when it comes to the spheres of influence within the FM corridors of power, and Sabah unfortunately being a minor player in this, and Johari unfortunately being seen as a minor official, because let's look at it this way: Sabah FA, because of the privatization, had to form a separate entity called Sabah FC, which is still competing in the Malaysian Super League and has been doing well in the last few seasons since their return to the Malaysian top flight in 2020. And the main character behind Sabah FC's revival is I think still currently the very outspoken, brash MP for the state, Member of Parliament for the state, Bung Mokhtar Radin. Yeah, this guy has outsized influence and charisma as a politician, which probably dwarfs Johari's presence as a football official. So because of Johari not being a politician as well, although Tan Sri Hamidin was never a politician nor a member of parliament, Hamidin is actually a party member in the party member in UMNO. So Johari's non-political affiliation in a better FA or in a better nation could be seen as an asset, but in the rather volatile Malaysian football circles, that is unfortunately seen as a vulnerability. And how so? I think how so? Because when you look at it further, you can see that the unraveling began quite slowly, but eventually accelerated in June, particularly in the flashpoint where the current men's national head coach Peter Klemowski had claimed that have they not defeated Vietnam 4-0 in the Asian Cup qualifying, there would have been some pressure from certain quarters, not just on him but also on his team, but also on his colleagues in the Harimau Malaya setup. And that was where Johari made a rather fateful call that probably accelerated the demise of his short-lived presidency, where he actually came out to say a couple of things. First, on the new foreign-born players, where he said that those players that were recruited, the 7 of them who were recruited this year, they were all verified that the documents were found in order by FIFA. Secondly, he also said, and which also set a path of, I think you can say, the behind the scenes war between that now rather autonomous Harimau Malaya setup and FAM under Johari, that behind the scenes collision cause, in which there's only one victor, and unfortunately the loser at the end is Johari himself. And after failing to settle it in the way that Hamidin would have done in the past, that's probably when his predecessor came back into the fold as the honorary president of FAM, which was only the second time FAM has ever installed this position on a former president. The other one being the late Sultan Ahmad Shah. Usually the role of the honorary president is actually to provide an additional spectrum of influence and credibility, but without trying to interfere in the decision making from the president and his council on the day-to-day basis or during the term. But as I think I mentioned in a previous video, the appointment of Tan Sri Hamidin as FAM honorary president has proven to be a double-edged sword, because by returning to FAM in that capacity, it shows that his influence is still omnipresent. It shows that he has never really gone away from FAM despite stepping aside to fulfill his Asian and world football commitments. But at the same time, the return has proven to be large. It has become too huge to ignore within Kelana Jaya. And I do suspect before his final act, which was actually the first Special Executive Council meeting on 11th of August inside the Kelana Jaya headquarters, the most likely final nail in the coffin, which I think was not exactly reported as much but had caused some confusion before the start of the Malaysian Super League campaign, where it was the quota on the number of foreigners allowed on the pitch. Initially it was speculated to be 8, but subsequently at the last moment, just days before kickoff, it was confirmed as 7. Only 7 foreigners can be on the pitch at any one time. And even though this flip-flop in decision making comes mainly under the purview of the Malaysia Football League, but being the president of the entire Malaysia football ecosystem, as president, it exposed, you can say to an extent, Johari's slightly indecisiveness. And that indecisiveness in trying to clear what he has said in the first interview after he took office was clearing all the messes that were left behind, that that still needed tackling when he took charge. And instead of clearing the mess, it has now been proven that the mess actually compounded under his charge. And that was where you can say that he has to take some responsibility, because he's the head of the domestic football system, overseeing the entire thing, even though he's not the one in charge, having had experience inside the MFL. And with that, where he has played rather a minor role in this indecisiveness, that tug of war between the autonomous Harimau Malaya setup where he lost, I think the writing was already on the wall by the time he held his final meeting on 11th of August. And by the time the first reports of him resigning surfaced late last week, the inevitable was already happening. And thus, as such, there's now a void to fill, currently helmed by Datuk Yusuf Mahadi. But at the same time, names were already swirling around on who would succeed Johari to finish the term that was supposed to last until 2029. And as so far, while a few names have been bandied, and rumored has it that Safee Sali, the former Malaysian national striker, has thrown his name into the ring, a notable name has stood out among a few names. I mean, one of the names mentioned was the current caretaker FAM president, who has had extensive experience in the local football administration, but has also held more powerful roles than Johari did in the Malaysian football administration circles. Then you have Khairy Jamaluddin, who is the former Malaysia sports minister and who was the man responsible for the successful running of the 2016 SEA Games in Kuala Lumpur. And you got a third one, a businessman who could provide financial backing, but he's not at the levels of the current Football Association of Singapore President Forrest Lee, who is one of the top billionaires in the Island Republic. So, with all these names being bandied about, and looking back from the fiasco or the rather unsatisfactory Johari presidency, to wrap things up, what makes a qualified Football Association of Malaysia president? And look at the names in view, I think I'll just sum it up with a few key points as well. A few key points. The first and very obvious one is, whoever is in charge of Malaysian football has to have passion for the game. Secondly, he has to have prior leadership roles in state level and also at the national football level. Those two things Johari Ayub possess in abundance. The third point, high visibility roles in the immediate past positions. This was where Johari fell short. Yes, he was involved in the 2017 SEA Games, but he was not the most visible character around. He was not the go-to man when the media needed him for queries on the tournament running and all that. And also, where even when he was FM vice president, he was one of the 4 vice presidents in the previous FM councils. So he's not regarded as one of the most powerful people in the inner sphere of decision making when it comes to Malaysian football. Then, in the fourth point, prior high profile position in football role, whether it was inside or outside football. One thing I have not mentioned was Johari's position outside of football. He is definitely a professional outside of football administration, but it is not high and visible enough for people to take note that he has that stature, he has that level of influence, the way the immediate past presidents of FAM had whether it was royalty when it comes to Sultan Ahmad Shah, Al Sultan Abdullah, or even the current region of Johor, Tunku Ismail Sultan Ibrahim, who is still the patron of Johor Darul Takzim and the man behind the autonomous Harimau Malaya project. These three are royalties with considerable influence, with strong passion of football, and had the ability to make people work under his charge, and their visibility also within the wider Malaysian political sphere, using their royal influence to set the tone for state administration or even national government administration when needed, particularly for Sultan Abdullah, where his experience in football made it rather interestingly useful during the political stalemate during the pandemic period. But Johari had none of that. Crucially, as I mentioned, Johari also did not have the same level of football or sports administration status the way Hamidin had, as even the chef de mission in major games, multi-sports games, or even Tan Sri Hamzah, who was not just a cabinet minister but also a member of parliament, and also subsequently a member of the International Olympic Committee until he passed away in the 2000s. Then you also had other politicians who were important, who because of their political status were greatly influential in their roles as FAM presidents. The founding Prime Minister Tunku Abdul Rahman, who was passionate about his football. Then you also have his successor, the second Prime Minister, who had the political clout to influence matters when it really needed it. And ultimately, when it comes to high-profile roles, even among aspiring candidates, whether he has thrown in the ring or otherwise, Safee Sali, he's recognized nationwide as one of the best strikers of his era. So already as a player, Safee has that national profile. And then add on to his current work in the Professional Footballers Association of Malaysia, where he's helping the president of PFAM to champion footballers' rights on and off the pitch, to fight for better working conditions, to settle contractual or more critically salary disputes, and to provide financial education on how to get the players protected against potential abuse of contractual obligations by clubs. Then you also have Khairy Jamaluddin. His record as the sports minister or even in the Malaysian cabinet speaks for itself. His ability to communicate to foreign dignitaries, to foreign contemporaries as a politician when he was in cabinet, or even outside of the Dewan Raya after he lost in the last general election. His political influence is still there. His credibility is still large. He is still touted as for a potential political comeback. So Khairy Jamaluddin, with that massive experience, with that massive massive experience and know-how on how sports works in Malaysia, he is in a prime position to be the FM president, especially when FM is about to celebrate its centenary next year. Khairy Jamaluddin may be the right man for this task. And finally, I think I really elaborated a lot on the fourth point. They must have had some notable experience with dealing with the officials and dignitaries from the ASEAN Football Federation and Asian Football Confederation, at least. FIFA, maybe not all are ready for it, but at least when you have AFF and AFC levels contact, and you can say contact and visibility, at least when this person shows up as president of Football Association, those in the inner circles of the Southeast Asian and Asian football networks will not be surprised, will not be wondering who this person is, because the incoming president will be a familiar face, and at least being familiar face, they'll start on a better level, on a better working level than a rookie who comes in being unaware, and that was where Johari was. So to wrap it up, Johari unfortunately was doomed to fail from the get-go, as in his short-lived FAM presidency over the past 6 months, and with the odds against him politically, or even in the experience required in football administration, he was found playing a lot of catch-up, and unfortunately found himself exposed to such a level that probably he realized that enough was enough, and that was when he decided that he had to go. Whether it was he who decided to go or others telling him to go is secondary. This we all can only guess, but it showed that taking on the second hottest seat in Malaysian football after the Malaysian men's national coach is always going to be a gargantuan task, a giant task that awaits any aspiring football political office holders. A task where the media, the football fans, the stakeholders, the players, the officials, the clubs, the sponsors, every aspect of football, you know it, you name it, they will all be looking at keen interest. And whoever is chosen as the permanent president to succeed Johari to finish the term until 2029, that will be met with great interest and intrigue, especially with those names that are being thrown up so far. Obviously, where this is concerned, I hope that it's Khairy Jamaluddin who gets it, and with Safee Sali possibly being the next deputy president, so that he can learn the ropes on what it means to really run a football association at the executive level, so that when the time really is right for Safee to step up, he'll be more than ready to take on the job. And that is where I think any aspiring office holder in football administration will be thinking of in the future, and perhaps take on roles that will give them that visibility, that will make them be known prior to being elected as president, in ways that you can say within Southeast Asia, where Eric Thohir, the current PSSI president, or Madam Pang in Thailand, who is currently the Football Association of Thailand president, or even the late Lim Kia Tong, the former Football Association of Singapore president, they all have had extensive experience in the wider football circles beyond their domestic market. So on that regard, I think having that level of high level experience outside of their homeland is crucial, and having high visibility in major football projects is also as crucial as well. And obviously being the character, the personality and all that, it all plays a part. But being able to be seen and capable of shouldering the huge burdens that affects the future, the direction of football in Malaysia as a whole, that's where any aspiring candidate or as an office holder will want to take note of. And I think the short-lived 6-month Johari tenure as FAM president is a lesson for everyone in the Malaysian football fraternity to draw lessons from, and how not to repeat it in the future, and how to navigate those political minefields, or you can say the rather complex nature, the complex journeys, that the complex route to the top. These are lessons to learn from those 6 months when Johari was in charge of FAM.